We're live.
All right. Hey, everybody. We are working to connect with our guest speaker for today, Rachel. She is in Costa Rica. And so I'm going to disappear for a moment and join a different Zoom room and then be right back. So hold on just a moment as we sort out the new technical difficulties. So hang on, have a chat with your lab group. See what you've explored since you watched Pedro's class, and then thinking about today's creativity and freedom. See what you think about that. So I'll meet you in just a moment.
Okay, should we move to that Zoom, Jen?
Yes. Oh, I left. Yes.
Okay.
Pedro is also joining us, and so he's the one that does the magic connect. And so we are good to go.
Okay. Do you need me to enable you to record this session then, or are you live streaming it a different way? It's all good?
Streaming it, yeah. Pedro, are we connected? All good?
Yes, we're live streaming, so don't need to record.
All right.
Thank you, Rachel.
Hi. All right, so we're live?
We are. So let me give them a little introduction.
Awesome.
Thank you all for your patience as we made those connections. I am here to introduce to you Rachel, Rachel Thor. She was a student a long time ago at Shavers Creek with me, and now I know her in a totally different world, a different light of being a guide and a coach and a mentor for many, as well as an explorer and an exciting conversationalist. And so I want to introduce to you this bold and gentle, beautiful soul, Rachel.
Well, thank you so much, Jen, for that intro. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you. I think this is, well, I can't see you, but it's good to be here with you. I think this is my third or fourth time teaching the creativity and freedom class with Jen. And every time I do it, it's different because I think that's part of the nature of creativity is there's this constant evolution. And specifically this time around, I'm living in Costa Rica right now, and my internet is so-so and my computer is dead. So I'm coming to you from my phone without slides, and it gets to be this invitation that our class gets to be co-created in even a new way. So every time I join this class, it's a creative endeavor for me and for everyone listening. So I'm excited to dive in. So what I want to start with is what I think you've been starting a lot of classes with, which is just a little bit of breathing. Jen tells me that you've been starting to practice mindfulness and experiencing your own breathing in a new way at the beginning of class. And in light of this class being about creativity and freedom, I want to talk about what you are creating just by breathing. And then we can go into that breathing exercise. So there's something really cool about knowing that every single breath you take, you're actually creating something for yourself. What I mean by that is that everything you do with your body gives a signal to your brain about what's going on in your world. So if you breathe your breath all the way into your belly, like a belly breathing, maybe you've heard, you're signaling to your body that the world is safe and that it's a good time to rest and digest. If you breathe more shallow into your heart, you're signaling to your body that into your upper lungs, you're signaling to your body that you want your energy to rise. Maybe there's a threat to deal with, or a big presentation coming up and you want more energy. The same thing is said with our inhales and exhales. Literally, all you have to do is make your exhale a little bit longer, like 1 or 2 seconds longer than your inhale. And you signal to your body that what we want to do as a body is slow down and come to a calm place. And you're actually creating chemicals in your brain that make you feel certain emotions that are connected to these states, like calm or anxious. So I wanted to say that because even with our breathing, we are creating part of our reality. So with all of that, let's take a few breaths together. And what we'll do is we'll count to 3. I'll count it for you. 3 on the inhale, and then 5 on the exhale. And we're doing that so that we are creating the chemical compounds in your brain that help you feel the emotions of calm and relaxation. So let's take maybe 3 breaths together, just like that. So go ahead and just let out all of your air. And then we're going to inhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. And slowly exhale for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. Exhale for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Last time, inhale and exhale. So just in that exercise, send it into the chats, into your TA groups. If you noticed a difference, if you noticed anything change in how you were feeling just through that particular breathing practice, go ahead and send that in. And while you're chatting about that, I'll sort of set the container for the rest of our time together. So basically, I'm going to tell stories, and then we're going to co-create what you want to get out of this. What I mean by that is that since we're talking about creativity and freedom, one of the most important things to know about creativity is that it's the opposite of consumption. When we're consuming, consuming media, consuming social, consuming lectures, we're taking it in. That's a helpful thing to do. But if that's all we ever do, we don't get the benefits of the reverse, where we actually put something out into the world, where we make something happen. So creativity is bringing something into existence that wasn't there before. And it's the opposite of consuming. Consuming is taking in somebody else's creativity. And creating our own thing is taking something that doesn't exist and making it so. So I'm going to start with my story of where I was when I was sitting in your seat. It was about 10 years ago now. And I remember about to go into undergrad with so much anxiety because I wanted to know what major I should be in. I wanted to know what my life was going to look like. I knew I needed to choose what career path I was going to take. And I felt like I was supposed to figure out which box I can fit inside of, that I'm going to be inside of for the rest of my life. Am I okay with only taking this one path and avoiding or ignoring all these other parts of me? But the truth was that I had so many interests. I still do. I can remember, talking to other people my age who were wondering the same thing. What major were they going to choose? And they were like, well, I just don't really care about anything. I'm not really interested. And I was going, are you serious? I'm freaking interested in everything. Like, I am curious. I want to learn about everything. I want to be everything. I don't fit into just one category. And so, while the whole world around me tried to counsel me and tell me, oh, you should take this path, this is how you decide, instead of consuming other people's responses, I decided to create my own wisdom by using all of my tools, my inner tools, all my parts, and tapping into my intuition. I made the decision that rather than try to figure out the box that I could fit myself in, I was going to create my own box. And what my own box said is, I'm going to follow the path that helps me feel most alive, even if that path changes and even if I don't know where it's leading. That's literally what I decided I was going to use as my criteria for choosing how I went about my education. Of course, this was unheard of, and all the adults in my life were like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. But for some reason, my inner guide said, this is what you should do. So now I'm going to tell you two versions of what happened next. Version one is I followed that path of aliveness. I followed it and ended up at Penn State creating my own major with every topic that I knew was important to me. I brought together psychology, education, philosophy, sociology, art, and RPTM, all of the wilderness stuff. I brought all these things together and created my own major, which at the time I called 21st century education. What I didn't know is that I created a major to teach myself coaching, which is what I do now with my life. That wasn't a major and it wasn't an option, and people didn't even know the term or the job coach when I was an undergrad. It's a new awakening career that didn't even exist when I went to school. Yet my intuition brought me everything I needed to become what didn't exist yet. So I had a vision of who I was and what I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to bring to the world. And no one else could see it because it didn't exist yet. But instead of following their guidance, instead of consuming their direction, I chose to create from my own vision, from my own inner direction. And lo and behold, I created my career, which is my purpose. I get to live my purpose every day. So what a coach is, if you're not familiar, is basically I work with people. It's all online right now. That's why I'm in Costa Rica. But I work with people who want to dive into what is their passion, what is their purpose, why are they here? Or they want to dive into I need help with my relationship, or I want to build a business. I want to create something that doesn't exist yet. And now I get to spend my days helping other people create their dreams, just like I've spent my life creating mine. So that's the first version of the story. It's the really glamorous version, and it's true. But I want to tell you the second version of this story, just so that you feel like this can be more attainable than just the glamorous version. The second version of this story is that following that aliveness meant that I changed schools halfway through. I started at Pepperdine and I transferred back to Penn State. It means that I changed my major 5 times. And when I was a senior, I was no closer to finishing any of those degrees than it's if I was a freshman or a sophomore. So my senior year, I was so anxious because I was like, I thought I was following this path of aliveness and it brought me to this horrible place. I'm nowhere close to finishing a degree. I'm scared. I've wasted all this time. I've wasted all this money. I could not see the future. But just when I needed it, this option through Penn State, I don't know if it still exists, but there was a program called the Bachelor of Philosophy, showed up, which allowed me to create my own major. And what that means is I brought in everything I had already learned to make the major, and I spent 1 additional year working on a thesis that helped me integrate everything together. So can you feel the difference in the 2 versions of the story? It's the same story, but creativity and following your aliveness and following your creative path is not always easy, and it's not always clear. You will absolutely hit those moments in your path where you're like, what the heck am I doing? I've gotten it all wrong. You just will hit those moments where you go, I don't know where I am and I don't know where I'm going. But remember that those moments are part of the creative path, because the path of creativity is bringing something that doesn't exist yet into existence. So if you're actually going to create something, if you're actually going to bring a vision into reality, you have to get comfortable walking through the unknown. You have to get comfortable being lost, because that's the only place that something new exists. If that's not the path for you, if you want to follow somebody else's path that they've already lined up, then you're going to know what the steps are because somebody else already laid that path. But if you want to follow your own path, you will have to get comfortable facing the unknown. Okay? So that's my first story. And another point I want to highlight about creativity and freedom here is that to get comfortable in the unknown, we have to use all our parts. If I'm going to live in the unknown so that I can create things that never existed before, then I need to trust my intuition. I need to trust my guiding inner voice, or even like inner body impulses that don't make any sense. And I need to trust them because no one else is going to. No one else can feel or see your vision the way you can, because you're the one who has access to the idea and the dream. Nobody else does. So the rest of the world's not going to see it until you've already created it. Like, that's why I can tell you about my story now on this call, because I've created it. Now it makes sense to people. They can go, oh, that's what she was doing all this time. She was creating a coaching career, not just a coaching career, specifically a body-based and nature-based and intuition-based coaching career, which is totally my particular creation. Right now, people can see what I've created, so they go, oh yeah, that all makes sense. But for years, I was the only one who could see it. And so it's up to me to trust my inner guidance beyond what anybody else can see. You have to do that if you're going to go on your own creative journey. All right. So I'm going to pause there. That was my first story, and kind of how I got started with all of this. So take a minute here and just reflect to yourself, what stuck out to you? Which part of what I said captivated you or made you think about your own life? And share that in your small groups. And TAs, you can be collecting some things that want to get shared. And Jen, I couldn't download the GroupMe. So Jen, if you can pop on after some answers start coming through, and maybe you can sort of deliver them.
Will do.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to sit here for a minute, give you all some time to talk. What is the thing that you want to create that maybe you've been scared or unsure about? What's the unknown you're in? Or what's the other piece of this story that you connect with? Go ahead and share. And Jen, let me know if there's anything coming through or if we should just keep going.
We do have some things coming through, Rachel. And so some folks really connected first with your breathing. So thank you for bringing that um, to us, that idea of breathing out longer than breathing in. And then other things that people are mentioning is that the getting comfortable with the unknown is a thread that's running through here. Having to decide what we're going to do and be for the rest of our lives and if it's right for us. Somebody said, I really related to this message because I have no idea what I want to major in, and I really dislike when people tell me what I should do. Someone else says, yeah, right now I'm terrified about the future, but she mentioned sticking to your gut, so I'm trying to live by that kind of life motto when it comes to future endeavors. Being comfortable with feeling lost and facing the unknown, because that's the only place where you learn something new. Someone said, I think it's so cool to listen to how other people's minds work and how it makes them successful. So acknowledging that that everybody is different in the way that they, come to their choices. Finding comfort in knowing that it isn't going to be a lifelong decision. You can always reevaluate and find something in life that gives you more satisfaction. Liking the idea that there's not one set path, that we're in control of our own lives and take whichever path that we desire. We can change our story at whatever point we want to. There's no stopping us. I'm amazed at the strength it takes to push through the fear of unknown, the fear of messing up your life, and the fear of disappointing others.
Oh, that's such a big one. That's where a lot of our fear of the unknown comes from, is like, what if I disappoint somebody else? What if I get kicked out of the tribe?
Yeah.
And yet it's still the pathway to new places. Beautiful. Anything else that stands out, Jen?
They mentioned how the creativity is the opposite of consumption. Somebody felt as though that was a really powerful thing that you dove into.
Yeah. Everybody who's sharing these responses, I'm so blown away by how deeply you're taking these in and feeling the message and applying it to your own life in your own way. Somebody mentioned, that I'm talking about my way and that we all have our own, and that's exactly right. And that's part of the creativity too, is that every single one of us has our own path. Nobody's story is going to look like mine if they're walking their own path. So the invitation is not to make your path look like mine. It's to make your path look like yours. Okay, so I think I'm going to tell one more quick story, and then I want to flip the script here with the time we have left and really make the rest of our time about you creating the class with me. And by doing that, instead of just consuming what I have to say, what I mean is really drop in. Maybe you do your own breathing again and see what's the question that I really want to ask. We have this time together, and I'm inviting you to create the experience that you have with the rest of our class by asking the question that's bubbling in your gut, that's going to change your life, maybe, right? So, and it doesn't have to be that big either. Don't put too much pressure on it. But I'm inviting you, don't just consume this class. Really, even if you're watching the replay, really think, what is a question that feels really important to me right now? So as those questions show up, you can start sending them to your TAs through the chat as I tell this story, and then we'll flip and we'll just start getting through as many questions as we can. Okay, so this is the flip side of the first story in some ways. And there's a reason I want to share it, because in the first story I said, I followed this meandering path and I was always looking for what's the class, what's the topic that's going to bring me aliveness. And so what I did was change a lot of times. Now, I'm a Libra. I don't know if you believe in astrology, but for me, balancing opposites is really important. And a lot of times, what those really profound opposites, what they do is we have, two sides of the same truth. So I shared one side of the truth in that first story. The second side of the truth, the paradox, the opposite, is also true in the second story here. So at one point, it's going to be a quicker one. I was writing, what would you call it? Like a soliloquy, basically, a performance that I got invited to do. It was for a sex positive workshop, and I got to write about my experience of using dance to heal and transmit trauma that I had experienced, and my intuition, how my intuition brought me through that. So I'm writing this story, and I send it in for feedback, knowing, okay, it's only at draft 2, and I really need this feedback so that I can make it super good. But no one ever gets back to me. I write him again, hey, can you send me the feedback? Nothing. Finally, it's the day before the performance, and I have not gotten any feedback from them. And so I am so pissed. I'm like, oh my gosh, my story's not ready. It's going to be horrible. It's their fault because they're being irresponsible. Da 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 da. And so I start spinning this story of why I am not free right now because somebody else.
Rachel, first, hi, Rachel. Hello.
They messed up, if it's their fault or not. It doesn't matter. What matters is what I choose to do with this moment now. And what I choose to do is give myself feedback and rewrite it on my own and make it the best freaking presentation that I can possibly do, regardless if they ever get back to me or not. So I made the choice inside myself to create the internal circumstance that I wanted, regardless of the external circumstance. Your freedom and your creativity is not just about finding it out there in the world, not just about finding your place out there in the world. It's about finding what you want to choose in here at every moment with every breath. And when you do that, you will create what you want to see in the external world. So I rewrite my performance, I send it to them, and I get great feedback that very night on my next draft. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I thought this person did it. I thought that person did it. But none of that mattered because I got to choose how I was going to end the story. So that's the flip side. Freedom and creativity comes from within. Don't wait for your external circumstances to be perfect to think that you get to feel alive or feel happy. And you see how those two balance each other, where you can make the decisions to move toward your external alignments. At the same time, you got to be responsible for making the decisions to move toward your internal alignments. And the two of them go together, just like an inhale and an exhale. If you only ever inhale, you'll die soon. If you only ever exhale, you won't last very long. And it's the same with opposite concepts. If you only ever look for the external world, you'll lose your creative spark. If you only ever lean on your internal world, you'll lose it too. So you got to inhale, exhale the internal world and the external world. Okay, so that's my second story. I think we have about 15 minutes. So Jen, when you're ready, you can pop in if we have any questions. And if you are still thinking of a question, go ahead and take your time and send it to your TA.
There's one comment here that I think could turn into a beautiful question is that somebody said, today's world is so centered around money. So I think it's hard to have a job that you love, but can also support you financially. And so I think that could be a really beautiful question. How is it how does that balance work? Having a job that you love that also supports the financial need of life.
Totally. I think that's a great question. And to be perfectly honest, that is a cultural issue that we have created. Like, we have designated culturally that work is often not fulfilling, and its designation is to get money. Or you do the fulfilling thing, like be the artist that you want to be, and you're not making any money. So that comment actually speaks directly to something that we as a culture have created together. It doesn't have to be true, but if you don't want that to be your reality, you have to be willing to go into an unknown world and go in and rewire your own brain, your own beliefs around that cultural story. You have to be willing to be different than the rest of your peers who still believe that story and make choices based on that being true. Now, the flip side is it takes work, it takes grit. If I could do one thing differently in my undergrad and in my whole weaving of all of these pieces, the other thing I would have added in was an MBA. Like, absolutely. I would study nature and wilderness and psychology and art and business. Because again, our soul and our money, maybe these feel like opposites, but actually they're an inhale and an exhale. And so if you want to live in a world where they're both fulfilling you, then you got to strengthen both muscles. You have to make the conscious choice to learn both skills and bring them together. Now, I'm talking from the perspective of an entrepreneur because I created my own business doing what I love. There are a lot of jobs, and more are being developed every day, where companies are desiring to bridge these in the work that they're offering. So here's the other thing I want to say about jobs. This phenomenon was starting when I was an undergrad, but it's full-fledged right now, which is traditionally we were sent to school to learn the skills we needed to go be factory workers during the Industrial Revolution. What are the skills you need for those type of jobs? You need to sit in a chair for 8 to 12 hours straight. You need to be able to follow directions impeccably. And you need to actually probably not think too much for yourself so that you don't leave that job behind. We are automating those jobs, and we are in an unprecedented time in our world where the jobs that our generations before us had are being automated, are being replaced, and are not serving our planet anymore. So you are actually living through the evolution of what careers even look like. Many of you, myself included, are going to have jobs that don't even exist yet. The job you're going to have a few years from now doesn't even exist yet because everything is moving forward so fast. That's why, even if you're not planning to be an entrepreneur, starting to develop the skills now of being comfortable with the unknown and leaning toward all these things that your intuition says go toward, even if it doesn't make sense yet, is actually taking you toward the creative path to participate in a world that is literally being created under our feet. You get to be one of those people instead of waiting and consuming the change. Any other questions coming through, Jen?
Lots of them.
Okay. I'm
right.
happy if we don't, we're only probably going to get to one or two more. So I'm also happy to kind of write an email and answer more questions later. Or I think what we did last time is anyone that wants to stay on the call longer, well, we can end the class on time, but I'll stick around longer and keep answering questions.
Yes, I can give them the link to your Zoom room, and so then they can just come and join you here since we're streaming to YouTube. That's how they're watching. So
Perfect.
We'll just have them connect back to you. But we can
Okay.
And so someone asked about how do I tap into my intuition? What's the truth when I hear negative self-talk?
How do you tap into intuition, and what's the truth when you hear negative self-talk? Oh, such good questions. So you can watch, I'm going to tap into my intuition right now to answer the question. So you can watch me do it, and then we'll talk about it. So for me, tapping into intuition is a science and a spiritual practice. In reality, what I believe intuition is information coming from your enteric nervous system, which is basically a bundle of nerves in your belly. And those nerves are like neurons, the same type of connections that make up your brain. You have a cluster of those in your gut that are conscious, that can create information. A lot of times we call it the subconscious. But your stomach is about as smart as the cat, which all things considered is pretty phenomenal. So what I do to tap into my intuition is I actually locate my awareness in my belly. So I intentionally, when I breathe, like you saw me do, longer exhale than inhale, and I intentionally imagine what's going on in my belly. I feel the sensation of my breathing go down into my belly. And it sort of like slows down the rate of thought that's happening in your mind. This is similar to a meditation practice with this added component of going into your gut. Now, your gut, because it's more like a cat, cats don't necessarily speak a language, but they know how to communicate. So when you're listening to your gut, to your intuition, you might receive that information in the form of a feeling, or a visual image might come to your mind, a color, a sensation, something that, a smart animal without language might experience. So let's see, is there anything else I want to say about intuition? Intuition lives in the present moment. So if you find yourself that you're thinking about the past or you're thinking about the future, that's probably not your intuition speaking. Come into this present moment. And if you're having trouble getting there, bring in more body awareness practices like yoga, meditation, even as simple as like touching your own arm and noticing what that feels like will bring you into the here and now. So what do we do with negative self-talk? Okay, that's a question for a lifetime. But the brilliance is that so much of our negative self-talk is not even ours. Like, we inherit these stories from the generations before us. We have inherited the way that we look at our body from our parents. We have inherited what we think about love from our family, what we have seen. We've inherited so many of these stories, and a lot of times this negative self-talk is just the worst possible scenario of all those things we've inherited. So what I do when I'm working with a client is I use something called parts work to help with that negative self-talk. We identify the part of you that believes that negative thing, and we help it get its needs met so that it can relax its grip on needing you to hear how awful you are. And like, okay, maybe I'm okay. And it creates space for other, wiser parts of you to show up and start giving yourself a different self-talk experience. The flip side of that, without needing coaching or sessions or anything, is just start. There's something, I'm going to check the time really fast. Okay. Our brains are kind of like a jungle wilderness. So imagine like this whole cluster of neurons in your brain is like a jungle. I'm looking at the jungle, so that's the metaphor. And it's so thick with overgrowth. If you want to get from here to there, you have to like machete your way through the first time around, right? But the second time when you walk backwards, you have to machete a little bit less. And if you keep walking that same pathway, eventually it gets wider and wider and wider. It gets more well-trodden. So that pathway becomes easier to travel. The same thing happens in your brains. Your neural connections are just like that. The more times you use a certain thought is like walking down the same path again. So every time you think the thought, I'm not good enough for that, you wear the groove deeper into that neural path. So if you want a different path, what that looks like is you have to start macheting your way down the path of going, I am good enough. I am good enough. And you have to like think about it, like for every single time you ever said this harmful voice to yourself, you're going to have to do it at least that many, if not more, on the positive side. And because this negative self-talk maybe has been wearing a path since you were a kid, since what you inherited, it's going to be the default. It's much easier to revert back to that one, but you can create a new one, a new path when you keep with it. So practice, 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 practice when it's unknown, when it's uncomfortable, when it feels really weird to say I love you to yourself, when you're like, why would I ever do that? Well, you say you're stupid all the time. You just haven't paid attention to it, right? So that's what I would say is just start and practice. Even if it's unknown and uncomfortable, you got to machete your way through that new neural pathway. And that's why, having some support in the community or with somebody that's helping you can really help you with that, because on our own, we tend to default back to what we know. But with somebody else helping us, we can stay on the new path easier. Okay, so Jen, I think we're at time. What do we need to do to close the call here? And then anyone who wants to stick around for more questions, you can pop into the Zoom room. Jen, go ahead and let us know.
Yes, I really think that you should hear the Howard Thurman quote and go slow enough that they can write it down, and then that's how we will close for today. And know that I will send the Rachel's Zoom room information out to all the TAs. TAs, you can forward it on to your students. So I'll put that in the group me now.
Perfect. Actually, I'm so glad you reminded me, Jen. So guys, I created this journal. It's a daily journal that literally I created it because there weren't any other journals that helped me. So I was like, I'm going to make my own that's going to help me. And I swear to you, today in the journal, I didn't try it at all, is this quote. It's today's quote. It's Jen and I's favorite for this class. So here, we'll be able to get a screenshot of it if you want to write it down. So the quote is, don't ask what the world needs. Instead, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And that's by Howard Thurman. Thank you so much for joining me for this class today. It's been such an honor. It's really special. And thank you, Jen, so much for having me.
Thanks, Rachel, for coming. And I'm excited to hear your stories every time. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just stay here. I'll just wait around for a little bit. If you wrote a question and you didn't get the answer, come pop in. I'm happy to talk.